Good day and welcome to this session on risk assessment. By the end of this session, you should be able to understand supply risk factors. So when we say risk, what does it mean? Risk is generally the likelihood of an unwanted event happening or the probability of an unwanted event happening. So it is mostly a key factor when you are prioritizing suppliers and supplies for investment in a relationship management activity, because you have to, in managing your relationship with suppliers, you have to determine or assess their likelihood of flouting in their deliveries. You have to assess their capacity, you have to assess their competence. So after assessing all these things, then you rate them in terms of the ones who are likely to disappoint in terms of supply and in terms of delivery time, in terms of even quality of goods or supplies that they bring to the organization. So after determining all these things, then you know that the suppliers or supplies that are characterized by higher disruption, failure or non-conformance of supply, or command excessive control in terms of the supply processes. Because in this instance, these suppliers who have to provide raw materials for the organization to use in its processes are likely to delay in their delivery or are likely to provide poor quality goods. Therefore, if the organization realizes some of these instances, they will tend to want to in supplier development or inventory management at supplier's end, or by providing certain support that the supplier will need so as to reduce the likelihood of some of these disruptions occurring. Because the essence of relationship management is mutual, and you get to realize that by so doing, by the focal firm where they invest in supplier competence and capabilities, it is not only the focal firm that will benefit, neither will it be the supplier only that will benefit, but both parties will tend to benefit from that investment in relationship management. So we then look at some of the supply risk factors in daily procurement or supplier relationship management. Daily procurement or supplier relationship management activities. The first one is supply risk. These are risks that are associated with an organization's supply chain, that is, its ability to supply or its inability to supply on time, in full, or to required standards. So, supply risk are basically what characterizes the likelihood of receiving or not receiving on time the goods that have been ordered for. So some of the factors that will affect the goods delivery, the goods availability, or the goods standardization and quality standards is what we term as supply risk. It is different from supplier risk because supplier risk is associated with the supplier themselves and not with the goods that are being transferred or transported, or failure of the supplier. So some of the likelihood or the outcomes that arise because of inadequacy or incompetence or failure of the supplier is what we term as supplier risk. And some of them include lack of capability or capacity. So maybe during pre-qualification, suppliers will come and promise in excess of what they can do. But eventually, the procurement organization fails to exercise due diligence and proceeds to award the contract to the supplier. So when the contract begins and the supplier is supposed to deliver and they fail to do so, that is what we term as supplier risk, because it is arising from the incapacity or incompetence of the supplier and not from the goods that were not delivered on time. Then we move on to environmental risk. They are uncertainties that characterize the natural environment in which the organizations operate. And some of these risks include the risk of disruption to supply, risks as a result of changes in supply markets and external environment. So some of the competition regulations, the macro and micro environmental factors, which are likely to affect organizations' operations or interactions with suppliers, are some of the things we term as environmental supply risk. Then we move on to demand risk, the tendency to have fluctuations or inconsistencies in demand for a product. So the likelihood that suppliers would or customers would demand excessively high products where you are unable to fulfill those demands, or the likelihood that customers will demand very low products where you will have excess inventory, and inventory, as we all know, is cost to the organization. So when there is excessively low demand for product, it means the organization will run at a loss due to inventory that will be left unsold. So in this session, we have basically described the concept of risk assessment in relation to supply chain.